For 20 years, Julian had cultivated patience the way a master gardener tends to a prized bonsai. He pruned away impulsiveness, weeded out anger, and watered the roots of a singular quiet goal. To an outsider, his life was a portrait of unremarkable consistency. A mid-level data analyst for a regional insurance firm, a resident of a clean but characterless apartment, a man whose most exciting weekly event was the arrival of a new history podcast. He was background noise, a person you'd pass on the street and forget by the time you reach the corner. And that was entirely by design. The object of this 2-decade-long exercise in self-control lived in a sprawling modern Tudor house on the other side of town, in a neighborhood called Chestnut Hills. His name was Leo Vance. Leo was the charismatic, sun-tanned CEO of a successful tech logistics company, a man whose beaming family photos occasionally graced the local lifestyle magazine. He had a wife named Isabel, 2 bright children, a golden retriever, and a life that looked as if it had been curated for a catalog. He also had a secret, a foundational crack in his perfect life that only he and Julian knew about. 20 years ago, that tech company wasn't a logistics firm. It was a fledgling software startup called Innovatech, and it had belonged to both of them. It was Leo who, with a silver tongue and a forged signature, had dissolved their partnership, patented Julian's code as his own, and left his former friend buried under a mountain of legal debt and personal ruin. Julian never fought back. Not in court, not in public. He had simply vanished, allowing the world to believe the narrative Leo had spun, that Julian was the unstable, unreliable partner who couldn't handle the pressure. He took on a new, blander version of himself and waited. He watched from an immense distance as Leo's stolen seed of an idea grew into a mighty financial oak tree. He read the articles, noted the promotions, and tracked the stock prices, not with bitterness, but with the detached focus of a researcher studying a subject. He wasn't plotting to take Leo's money or destroy his company. That would be too simple, too crude, too dramatic. Julian's plan was far more personal. He wanted to take back a piece of the life that was stolen from him, not by tearing Leo's down, but by subtly, methodically, and invisibly intertwining his own with it. His first significant move came on a crisp autumn Tuesday. After years of saving and meticulous investing, skills he'd honed in the quiet solitude of his post-betrayal life, he bought a house. Not just any house, but the modest, single-story brick home directly across the street from the Vance residence. He purchased it through a series of LLCs, a digital ghost leaving no trace of his name. The sale was unremarkable, just another property changing hands in a transient suburban world. That evening, Julian stood in the empty living room of his new home. The air smelled of old dust and fresh paint. Across the street, the Vance house was ablaze with light and sound. Figures moved behind the large bay windows, glasses were raised, and the faint sound of laughter drifted across the manicured lawns. It looked like a birthday party, perhaps for one of the children. Julian watched, his expression unreadable. He felt no surge of adrenaline, no vindictive thrill. Instead, a profound and placid calm settled over him. The kind of calm that comes not at the beginning of a storm, but at the quiet, patient setting of a perfect, long-gestating trap. He had waited 20 years for this. He could wait a little longer. He turned from the window and began to methodically unpack his single cardboard box of essentials: a kettle, a mug, a tin of tea, and a copy of The Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. His new life, his real work, had just begun. Julian settled into the house on Chestnut Hills Drive as seamlessly as a shadow. His days fell into a placid rhythm. He'd wake before dawn, make his tea, and sit by the large front window that was now his command center, watching the Vance family's morning routine unfold like a silent film. He learned that Leo left for the office at precisely 7:15 a.m. in his silver Lexus, that Isabel took the children, a boy named Alistair and a girl named Chloe, to the bus stop at 7:50 a.m., and that the dog walker arrived at 10 a.m. He worked his remote data analyst job with practiced efficiency, his fingers tapping on the keyboard as his gaze periodically drifted across the street. He was not a predator watching his prey. He was a historian, archiving the mundane details of a life he might have lived. His own presence in the neighborhood was a masterpiece of calculated neutrality. He mowed his lawn every Saturday, raked the leaves in the fall, and put out his recycling bins on the correct day. He was the perfect invisible neighbor. When others on the street waved, he would offer a tight, polite nod in return before disappearing back inside. He was a blank slate, a man without a story, which was precisely the impression he wanted to cultivate. He needed to be seen but not known, a fixture in the landscape that no one ever thought to question. The first point of contact, when it came, was as subtle as he had hoped. It was a blustery Tuesday morning, and the wind was whipping down the street with unusual force. Isabel Vance was struggling with an overfilled recycling bin, trying to drag it to the curb when a sudden gust caught the lid, sending a cascade of plastic bottles and cardboard across her driveway and into the street. With a frustrated sigh, she bent to start picking them up. As if on cue, Julian's front door opened. He was carrying his own, much smaller bin. Without a word, he walked over and began helping her collect the debris. He moved with a quiet economy of motion, picking up a few bottles and a flattened cereal box and placing them back in her container. "The wind's a nuisance today," he said, his voice even and low, not quite meeting her eyes. Isabel, flustered, murmured her thanks. "I'm Isabel," she offered. Julian simply nodded. The quiet man from across the street, he thought to himself, was a much better name. He gave a final brief nod and retreated into his home, leaving her with a vague impression of a helpful but intensely private neighbor. It was through this relentless, patient observation that he began to see the fine cracks in the glossy portrait of the Vance family. The perfection was a facade, maintained for public consumption. He noticed how Leo's shoulders slumped when he got out of his car each evening, the energetic CEO persona sloughing off to reveal a man worn down to the bone. One evening, Julian was in his garden, trimming a bush near the road, when Leo pulled into his driveway, speaking on his phone through the car's Bluetooth. His voice was raw with exhaustion. "No, I told them the margins are too thin. We can't just handle it. Please." He ended the call and sat in his car for a full 5 minutes, his head resting against the steering wheel before finally summoning the energy to go inside. Julian paused his trimming, shears in hand. He had spent 2 decades picturing Leo living a life of effortless triumph, basking in the glow of his betrayal. The reality, it seemed, was far more complicated. This wasn't the invincible titan from his imagination. This was just a man, tired and stressed, struggling to keep his own machine running. The discovery didn't bring Julian satisfaction or pity. It simply added a new, unexpected layer of data to his project. He finished trimming the bush with methodical precision. The knowledge that Leo was not living a charmed life didn't alter his plan, but it sharpened his focus. He wasn't just observing a symbol of success anymore. He was observing a man. And a man, he knew, could be broken in far more interesting ways than just his finances. The knowledge of Leo's private struggle settled into Julian's quiet world not as a catalyst for pity, but as the final, crucial variable in a long-running equation. For 20 years, his goal had been formless, a vague desire to reclaim a sense of intellectual and moral victory. Now, watching the tired man across the street, the plan crystallized into its final, elegant shape. Destruction was clumsy. True mastery lay in creation, and in the torment of a gift given by a ghost. Julian's revenge would not be a dagger to the heart, but a key to a lock Leo didn't even know he was trapped behind. For the next month, Julian dedicated his evenings to a new project. Using his professional skills for a personal end, he dove deep into the public financials of Leo's company, Vance Logistics. He analyzed market trends, shipping routes, and fuel cost futures. He read every industry report and every quarterly statement. From his observations of Leo's stressed phone calls and late nights, he correctly inferred the source of the pressure. A new, aggressive competitor was undercutting Vance Logistics on price, and a major client was on the verge of pulling their contract. Leo was fighting a war of attrition, and he was losing. Julian, however, saw what Leo, blinded by stress and pride, could not. He saw a systemic inefficiency in the company's regional distribution model and an untapped opportunity in last-mile delivery services for smaller e-commerce businesses. A market Leo's company considered too insignificant to pursue. Working with the focused intensity of a watchmaker, Julian drafted a comprehensive 20-page strategic report. It was a masterpiece of data analysis and corporate strategy, complete with financial modeling and a step-by-step implementation plan. It was brilliant, insightful, and most importantly, it was undeniably the work of a mind intimately familiar with the company's origins. It was filled with the kind of elegant, unconventional solutions that had been Julian's trademark 20 years ago. He printed the report on plain paper, slipped it into a standard manila envelope with no return address, and mailed it to Leo's office. Then, he waited. A week passed. The lights in the Vance house stayed on later than ever. Leo's silver Lexus was often the last car to return to the quiet street. Then, one Thursday evening, Julian watched Leo pull into his driveway. He didn't get out of the car. He just sat there, the engine off, the world outside dark. The only illumination came from the soft glow of the car's dome light. In his hands, he held a sheaf of papers. Julian could see him from across the street, his head bent, reading. He turned a page, then another. He leaned back, his eyes closed, and for a moment, Julian thought he might be crying. But it wasn't sadness on his face when he looked up, his silhouette framed by the window. It was a complex and chilling cocktail of relief, awe, and dawning horror. Leo would never know who sent the report. He would never have a name or a face to attach to his salvation. But he would recognize the mind behind it. He would feel the ghost of his former partner in every graph, in every bullet point. He would implement the plan, save his company, and secure his legacy. But every success would be a fresh reminder of the man he had wronged. He was saved. But he was also cursed to live forever in the shadow of an intellect he had cast aside. A silent, benevolent God who had reached down and effortlessly solved the problems that had nearly broken him. Across the street, Julian stood up from his window. He felt a quiet, profound sense of release. The scales, after 2 decades, were balanced. He had not taken Leo's money or his family. He had given him a gift, the most devastating gift of all. A lifetime of knowing that the smartest person in the room was the one he had cheated and left for dead. The next morning, a for sale sign appeared on Julian's perfectly manicured lawn, placed there by an agent from the anonymous LLC. He packed his kettle, his mug, and his book into a single cardboard box, and before the sun had fully risen over Chestnut Hills, he was gone, leaving behind nothing but a quiet house and a man trapped in a prison of his own success.
Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more interesting content coming soon.